Hello, welcome back to From Soft Serve. Today we find ourselves looking at the outside of Undead Parish. You might be wondering why. Why are we looking at this area that has a bunch of leafy textures on it? Well, that's because I robbed a texture from Bloodborne because I thought it'd be fun, and I'm upscaling Bloodborne textures in prior to Bloodborne being playable on PC, which currently it gets to character creation in the Shad PS4 emulator, but it gets no further. So I've been working on a Bloodborne texture mod, well, a visual overhaul mod, but I'll release the Bloodborne textures prior to that because people can then use them for their Elden Ring mods or Sekiro or wherever they want to put these textures. They could. And so the first few textures I found is this is my Bloodborne folder, and you go into map, and it's the same file structure as the other FromSoft games, which is what makes it really easy to kind of work on all the different games. Is they have a similar file structure, not completely. After DS2 and on, the file structure changed a little bit. But then it's been fairly consistent since then. Elden Ring switched up a little bit, but not too much. So M21, I was basically going in order. So the texture's stored in M21, and then of course I unpacked them, and you had M21000, and I was like, okay, cool. And then I grabbed all the underscore albedo textures, because then underscore S for specular, underscore R for reflectance, underscore N for the normal map, and so on. And I had the sky one, which I did upscale the sky texture, which very cool looking sky, by the way. Love to see it. Let's actually go over to our other DS Map Studio thing and load up our Bloodborne project, because I'm curious, what is M21? Oh, okay, so M21 is the Hunter's Dream and the abandoned old workshop. Now the actual, I'm going to show you the texture I stole, because this is the before. This is the sort of floor, or a little cobblestone. I don't know if you would call this cobblestone. It's like brick. It's brick floor or something. And this one is used around Undead Burg. Maybe too much. It's kind of everywhere. You can see it here and here, all the way through here. Then they switch over to some cobblestone, and then they're back, and then they have more, and then it's actually on this model as well, and then it's over here, and then it's all the way through here. It's used a ton. So let's check. Let's fly back over to our little spot. Get past some trees here. Looks a little goofy. Not the smoothest flyer through Dark Souls maps, so I apologize for that. All right, and so just remember that spot in your head, because I'm going to go back to our textures, and I was looking at, oh, okay, Brick 05, this one looks cool, right? I've been trying to keep an eye out if there's any Bloodborne textures that might make sense in Dark Souls 1, because Bloodborne actually had pretty high quality assets in a lot of cases, not always. So I came across this one, which is M21 underscore 00 underscore brick underscore 052 underscore A TPFTCX. And this is what it looks like. And immediately I noticed that it had leaves in between all the bricks. And when I saw that, I immediately thought of this area where they used these little like alpha textures, like little kind of basically like stickers, and they put them on top here to show the leaves sort of piling up. And it's only used in like this area, because they didn't end up having that leaf thing anywhere else. They had like little rubble stickers. We're actually in a Prepare to Die edition project right now, because it displays the textures better than my remastered project because of all the Blender work I've done. But yeah, it immediately made me think of this area. So what I did is I was like, okay, cool, bet. And so, oh, actually I had it pulled up here as well. Let's go into our Dark Souls Remastered folder. And so basically the process of porting a texture from Bloodborne to Dark Souls Remastered is pretty easy. So let's pull up this. We want to pull it into the M10 texture folder because that's where Undead Burg resides, and Firelink Shrine and the Depths. Those are all under M10. And so let's click in here and we'll shove it into our M100000, but you could put it into the 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. That doesn't really matter. Any of these folders, those 3 maps we'll be able to pull from just by the name. So let's go into here. And I basically was like, okay, cool. So if I want to put a new texture into one of these folders for use in the game, I usually pick an existing texture. Or no, I did it into M10001, that's right. So in here, if you scroll down, really you could do it to any of these, but I like to name it something similar. So there's already M10 floor block, and then M10 floor block 02, 03, because the one we're looking at here is M10 floor block. And there's 3, 4, and what I did is I created a new one called M10 floor block 05. So essentially what I did is I copied 04, 04N, 04S, and then I just renamed them to 05, 05, 05, and I unpacked them. And then they will then pop up here, and you'll see 05N, 05S, and 05. And then what I did is I shoved, and this is what you can actually see here, I copied the albedo texture here, and I dumped it into the folder. You can see I recolored it a little bit, and I tried to switch it up. And so I copied it in, boom, and then for the normal map, let's check that, 05N, and we open up the 052N. Now you'll notice that by default, it's actually, they look different. And that's because the normal maps for Bloodborne, I was a bit surprised by this, are BC1 compression, which is kind of old. That's actually what like Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind uses. That's what the Prepare to Die edition, that's what Dark Souls 2 Vanilla uses. And past that, they moved to a different normal map compression like BC5 for Dark Souls Remastered, but Dark Souls 2, I think, uses BC3, Scholar of the First Sin at least, and then Dark Souls 3 moves to like BC7. So I found it interesting that Bloodborne still relied on BC1, as it's not as good of a compression. But anyway, so if you want to convert that to what Dark Souls Remastered uses, because you'll notice here the coloring is completely different. You open up the normal map, which it's a beautiful normal map. These textures were 2K resolution already, so they didn't need upscaling, for me at least. I don't really tend to upscale to 4K that often, only if it's used on like a giant space, right? So basically, if you want to save a BC1 compression and then save it to a DSR compatible one, we essentially pick DDS. Now you can do this in whatever image program you want, but I like paint.net for a lot of simple tasks like this, because whenever you save it as DDS, you can then choose the actual compression that you want to use. And you'll notice here it has BC5 linear unsigned ATI2. That's the very specific one that Dark Souls Remastered uses. And whenever you click it, you'll see, boom, it basically is moving something from the one channel to the red channel. And then that's why it basically gets recolored. And so if it's ever this color, you know it's the right compression. And you go, boom, that's it. That normal will now work in Dark Souls Remastered just fine. If you keep it as BC1, it will display weirdly in the game. It'll have like little artifacting. Now, if for whatever reason you want to keep it BC1, which doesn't make any sense, you can actually open this witchy TPF file. And under the format portion here, 36 is the number that they use for the BC5 normal maps. If you want to have it still be BC1 but display in-game correctly, you can change this format to 1, and then it will pack it in a way that the game will accept a BC1 normal map. There's no real good reason for doing that, so I don't recommend it. But if for whatever reason you want to, because you're a madman, mad woman, mad person, then you can do that. So that's the normal map. The specular map is a little different. So this one is the default spec map that you actually pull in from Bloodborne. Now, Bloodborne has a reflectance map and a spec map, and that's because it had a more advanced PBR setup than Dark Souls Remastered uses. Which, if I might be incorrect on this, but PBR Specular, I think, is the more complex one, where you can have like reflectance maps and spec maps, and you can have and roughness maps, and you can have a lot more than just like what Dark Souls Remastered has. It's just your standard albedo, normal map, spec map. So it's more limited, but you do a lot of work within the spec map then. But what works pretty well, and this is thanks to Trivia, who is one of my cohorts, is that the right word? But anyway, you open up the original spec map in Photoshop, and you pop that bad boy open, and this is what it looks like. And it's actually really low resolution, so I might fix that. It's 256 by 256, which for DSR is strange, but I might upscale it later. But anyway, you go into Image, Adjustments, and then you invert. And you then invert it, and you save that. And then this is the spec map that you get. And honestly, in game, it works really quite well. And so I might try upscaling, because that is usually for the spec maps in DSR. If the original resolution of the texture is like 2K, then the spec map will be 1K. But even more so, like if it's a 1K texture, it'll have a 512 by 512 spec map. So a little bit low resolution for a 2K texture, but Bloodborne must have had a reason why they had such a low resolution spec map. I don't know. I think the reflectance map was actually higher resolution, so such is life. Anyway, we've done that, and then on top of it, just for funsies, I decided to make a height map so I could use parallax occlusion mapping. And so that's what you'll see with the M10 floor block 05H, because that's how I like. Now, you don't have to actually call it _H, but I tend to do that for height maps because that's what the original naming scheme was for Dark Souls Remastered for any sort of height map. And so basically I made that folder, and then I had my albedo texture, and I pulled it into Later, which Later is it's mostly used for like pixel art, apparently. But it's actually really awesome for creating parallax maps. And so there's two different ways you can make a height map. You can do binary, where it's black and white, and so the black represents things that are higher, and then white represents whatever on the texture should be lower when they're creating like the parallaxed geometry in game. And then there's also the optional height map, which I think it's loading. Yeah, there you go. So it looks a little different. I prefer the binary one for when I really want there to be like distinct height difference between the bricks and like what the lower portion is. It even gives you a little preview as well, which is nice. You can kind of turn on the parallax, turn off the parallax. Of course, you want to look at it in game, as that's the best way to do it. You save the height map as BC1 compression. I believe I forgot to mention that the albedo texture. So most albedo textures in Dark Souls Remastered, it might be albedo, I don't know how to say that. Most of them are just BC1 compression, your standard old compression all the way back from the Prepare to Die edition. They didn't really update that. Occasionally there'll be a BC7 compression because it does support that since it's DirectX 11 based. But thankfully for this, I noticed with some Bloodborne, I clicked on some and some were like BC1, but a lot of them are BC7, which is great, but it also doesn't make sense why they're normal maps. They didn't go to a better compression, for it. But anyway, the albedo texture, actually, yeah, is it still saved as, yeah, it is. Okay, cool. So it'll show up as DX10. And it's actually 2K by default. So what I did, because I brought it in game as 2K by default, and it did stand out. I posted on Twitter, and people were like, yeah, it looks almost too high quality versus the other surfaces that are nearby. And that's mostly because the other surfaces were either 512 by 512 or 1K, and they were upscaled. So upscaled 2K is not going to look as good as native 2K resolution, right? So the cool thing to make it easily work with Dark Souls Remastered, you do have two options. You can either, and this is probably what I should have done. In hindsight, I'm actually thinking about it, I'm like, fuck. So one way you can do it is just open it up. And then when you go to save it as its Dark Souls Remastered version, if you want to keep it simple, you can just save it as BC1 and easy peasy lemon squeezy. But now that I'm thinking about it, I just had a light bulb moment where I'm like, fuck. So what you can do, let's find because I'm forgetting I'm actually forgetting what the format number is for BC7. Luckily, I believe we just need to pull up any sort of alpha-related albedo that uses any alpha at all. I believe we're about to find it. Decal blood floor. Yes. Aha, DX10. So in here, it's 38. So yeah, so if you want to, let's do that actually. Let's go back to our block 05. I should have done this. This is my bad. So basically we switch this to 38. Booyah. Because now, whenever you do that, then in-game it will look correctly. Because it's been packed correctly, the game can accept BC7. And I have the original, well, let's make sure I actually copy in the original. Let's see, 052. Okay, and I actually had downscaled it to 1K and then upscaled it, but for this, we'll just do it again. And let's save it as this, but we're gonna save it as BC7. Now, I believe it's BC7 linear. DS3 is annoyingly BC7 sRGB, which I remember I upscaled like an entire folder's worth, an entire map's worth of textures, but I had saved them all as linear, and then you go in game and it looked totally fucked up, and I was like, fuck. But anyway, so let's save that, and let's witchy that, and yeah, I definitely need to be doing that for any albedo I pull from Bloodborne. I need to keep it as BC7 if it is BC7. The normals we have to go over to BC5. That's just, I always hate that. Yeah, I gotta close my project. I don't have my DS1 project even open. What are you talking? Oh, it might be Fiverr Editor. You never know. There's something that ends up using the folder. No, shit. Oh, maybe it's later. It's always funny. You have to figure out which one is using that file that you're trying to repack. Like, son of a bit. Okay, all right. Okay. Because this one's loaded up with Bloodborne, so that's definitely not the case. Oh, it's probably Photoshop. It's probably Photoshop. You want to bet that it's Photoshop? It is not Photoshop. What? Okay. In what world are you still having claim? Oh, okay. Fine, I'll close that too. Okay, well that's ridiculous. Because first of all, I had a Bloodborne project loaded, and I didn't even have my DS1 project loaded, but such is life. All right, we have loaded the M1001. So now we should have our map in game. And let's actually load in. And let's go to Mod Engine 2, launch mod Dark Souls Remastered. Oh, I also released a new version of the mod, but I just didn't tell anyone. Not even on Twitter. I forgot. But yeah, it brings some shading upgrades to, I think, Anor Londo and the Painted World and some mesh fixes. And it's like 1 gigabyte in size, I want to say. But it's pretty cool. I think I'm still in the same area. We're about to find out. Maybe. Fingers crossed. Haha, we are. All right. Let's kill this guy. Did you know that this helm is even in the game? I was using DSR Gadget, and I was looking through the armor, And there's the royal helm, which is apparently of the Vamos skeleton blacksmith. I was like, what the fuck? Anyway, you can see the floor here, which you can tell it does have its little leaves in between the bricks. You can see there actually is some specular, so that spec map is actually working. And you can see the parallax occlusion is working. And yeah, now one thing I can do in Blender is I can actually change the scaling on it to see like how big the bricks are. So I can make them smaller. Now, of course, the more scaling, like the more you zoom out with the scaling, can make it look more tiley, because of course it is tiling the texture, because obviously the surface is larger than what the texture is. And oh my god, look at that guy. That's me on a Monday morning. Actually, not really. Oh, I just realized that looks kind of weird. Oh, is it because it's receiving shadow? Oh, okay. Interesting. I was just double checking the mesh shading. But yeah, so the texture works in game just fine. Oh, someone just killed the gargoyles. You love to see it. Now, one thing I did do, because I wanted it to fit a bit better in the space, so you can basically pull up the albedo texture, and then you can actually see this is what I ended up changing about it, but let's do it again, because I wanted it to match a little bit better with Undead Burg, right? Because it's got greenish and yellowish hues, and the original texture there was quite like greenish and hueish. Greenish hue. So you can kind of alter the coloring of it just a tad, and then you can kind of mess with the saturation as well. So just a tad, and then the lightness. So you can see we just change it just enough, just a little bit. And it probably fits within the DS1 aesthetic a little bit better. So my dog is currently jumping on my cat outside my door. You love to see it. Perfect timing. I need to end this video anyway, as I've rambled on far too long for the most niche topic of all time, which is here's how you port textures from Bloodborne into Dark Souls Remastered for pure funsies. But yeah, I think it matches with the Undead Burg aesthetic. I might make it a little bit more green, but I don't want to mess with the leaves color too much, because the leaves, I guess I do want them to match like the actual alpha texture. Oh yeah, I got to fix that. The flickering there, it's actually like the level of this little sticker, I think, is just a little bit too low. But yeah, I think it actually looks pretty cool. And let me know what you think, and in the comments. I would love to hear, and also enjoy my paladin armor. It's very sick. Let me put my paladin helmet on. Very cool. We also have the Ornstein. There's something going on with the robe. Can you tell that there's like this weird bulge? I gotta load up another character and see if that happens, because I'm like, what the fuck is going on with that? So I got my Ornstein armor, which you love to see. And yeah, I'll see you on the next video. Thank you for watching. Why people enjoy some of these videos, I don't know. They're quirky, weird, niche shit. And but anyway, I'll post another one soon. And yeah, I'll see you then.